Hello, welcome to the Kellogg's Tour, the richest ever all-professional cycle race to be run through Britain, and a very special welcome today to our friends at RTE in Ireland who are with us for the duration of the tour, and we're very pleased to have you along. In case you weren't with us yesterday, let me just recap. The tour is good, very good in fact, arguably tougher in stages than the Tour de France. It's run over 5 days, 625 miles in total, running right through the middle of Britain from Edinburgh, where we were yesterday, and we finish in London on Sunday. Today's stage from Newcastle to Manchester is 170 miles. That's longer than anything that we witnessed in the Tour de France last week. It's also tough, very tough. This is Richmond, the gateway, if you like, to the Pennines, and just around that corner are two first category climbs, Greets Moss and Fleet Moss, between them nearly 3,600 feet of mountain. And the pain for the riders isn't over after that. 3 more second category climbs will test the best in the world, and believe me, we've some of the best on this tour. There's also then a punishing finish, 4 circuits of Manchester. Well, it was on the circuits in Newcastle yesterday that we got our first stage winner. The popular Australian Alan Piper was good enough to get away on his own and stay there, and the yellow jersey was Piper's at the end of the day. Well, there's the current leaderboard with Malcolm Elliott, much fancied for a win, tucked in nicely in 6th place. Behind Adrian Timmis, who went very well indeed yesterday, his teammate. It was Timmis who mounted the challenge to Piper on the circuits in Newcastle. Well, Piper, by his own admissions, isn't the best climber in the world, so there's every chance that we'll have a new leader this evening. My tip, keep your eyes on the world's #1, Sean Kelly. Well, it won't be too long before the riders are through here in Richmond now. 99 of them at the start this morning. We lost John Herity from the Percy Bilton team very early yesterday through illness. I wonder how many more we'll lose today on a very tough stage. Let's join our tour commentator, Phil Liggett.
And thank you, Richard. And in fact, the race now through Richmond, having covered 46 miles, and we're heading out towards the village of Grinton, which everybody knows who tours through the Yorkshire Dales in their car, is really the lift up over Greets Moss, this first major climb of the marathon today. And that really is the word of this second stage of the Kellogg's Tour. 170.6 miles, the farthest any professional field has ever raced in Britain since cycling began 100 years ago. We're on the climb now of Greets Moss. Stephen Hodge in the yellow team colours there of the cast team. Alan Piper in the sunglasses in the yellow jersey of race leader, riding very, very well for a man who says he has no illusions about being a climber at all. And believe me, this climb here commences at a gradient of 1 in 8 and only gets worse. Pace being set in the middle there by Gilbert Duclos-Lazal, the rider who won that red winner's jersey in the catch sprint competitions in the Tour de France. He comes from down in the Pyrenees. He should be well used to climbing these high mountains. This climb taking the riders up to over 1,600 feet, up amongst the grouse, who are now ducking for cover after the glorious 12th began yesterday. So Duclos-Lazal in the white jersey. Far right, Stephen Hodge, the Australian, who started to show a little bit of form yesterday. He finished well up amongst the front runners. Looks over his shoulder there as we swing right. The village of Redmire, 5 miles, was on the board there. And this is the field now beginning to string itself out for the first time today, because the opening 2 hours of the race, the riders only covering 17 miles in each hour. So quite clearly this field was frightened of this climb, and well they might be. This looks like Denny Roux beginning to launch an attack. And Denny Roux waiting for London on Sunday because his sister teaches English, would you believe, in Billericay in Essex, and she'll be in Westminster. She hopes to see Denny come home in a high position. So Denny Roux showing his colours at the front, and this is the damage he's causing at the back. And once again, our helicopter has the bird's eye view over this wonderful climb in glorious conditions. It really is most pleasant out on the moors today, and Denny Roux is setting an excellent pace. He had a marvellous Tour de France. He really came good this year in his second tour. He finished 20th in the Tour de France, riding for the Z Peugeot Danaher team. And he's setting a real tough pace up here. This is stringing the field out right across the moors. There's Roux, Stefan Rux on the far side of him there, and it looks like Rux is going to have a go for it. Approximately a quarter of a mile to the top of the climb, and Stefan Rux is attacking. Well, it's not often you see a Dutchman on the attack in the mountains. They come from the lowlands. But Rooks is no stranger to mountains. He won the Flemish Classic in Belgium, which is in the Ardennes Hills, in 1983, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He's also won the Amstel Gold Race. So it looks as though now the Battle of Swaledale is on, and the man on the front is Stefan Rooks from Holland and the PDM team. And look how he split this field up. So Rooks trying to draw one or two riders away with him here. I'm going to try and get a look at who they are. One is certainly Denis Roux in that yellow crash helmet in second place, and I'm not too sure, but it looked to me as though Joey McLaughlin from Liverpool could have been the other rider trying to come up with him. This whole field now absolutely fragmented, and they really felt this morning, you know, as they set out, that they would in fact ride these early hills together and nobody would attack, considering the distance still to come. Remember, once we go through the Yorkshire Dales this afternoon, the riders are going to be out in the wilds of Lancashire and still in the mountains. It really is a most vile day, and that's the only word to use. Look at this rider climbing here, Stefan Rooks, out of the saddle all the way. Sometimes our cameras sort of lessen the gradient somewhat, but it's between 1 in 8 and 1 in 9, this average gradient. Rooks looks over his shoulders. It's certainly McLaughlin there in the second place behind the Frenchman, Denis Roux, and they're pulling well clear of the field. This could be a springboard here for the riders to form a small breakaway group, despite the fact they're only coming up towards the 62 miles point, leaving themselves still 108 miles to go once they're over the top of this climb. Steady pace here by Stefan Rooks as he comes up to the last 200 yards of the climb of Greets Moss, the first major obstacle of the Kellogg's Tour this week. And a little bit of a surprise, but I suppose not to the followers of international cycling, because Rooks is really a very, very good rider indeed in the hills. His elbow bandaged there from a previous crash. Looks over his shoulder to make sure he's got the lead, and he goes over the top of the climb. He makes maximum points here towards the King of the Mountains polka dot jersey. Remember this morning on the shoulders of Bradford's David Rayner. But Rayner not in at the moment as far as we know this leading group. So Stefan Rooks will shortly begin his long twisting descent down towards the village of Redmire, and this will take him down into Wensleydale, home of course of the famous cheese. So that should mean something to a Dutchman. There is the honours list of Stefan Rooks, winner of the Tour of Luxembourg in 1986 and also the Amstel Gold Race in 1986 and 9th in last year's Tour de France. In addition to that, in 1983 he won the other famous classic in Belgium, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And just look at this split behind. The field now grappling for wheels here, and here's the man who's caused absolute carnage behind, Barry Dodd, our cameraman, right up alongside him there, recording the pictures for us. And that in itself, believe me, a most hazardous occupation. And there's the view from Barry Dodd's camera as we go down now at something around 45, 50 miles an hour, this long descent off these famous grouse moors down towards Redmire. And there's confirmation of the King of the Mountains there as the sheep dash across the road in front of him. Stefan Rooks first, Joey McLaughlin, excellent second place for the man from Liverpool, and it was Denis Roux in third place. Fourth place there going to Stephen Hodge. A good ride for him from Australia and Sean Kelly's Cass team. So this is the way down the mountain. These are the riders trying to get together to try and form some sort of chase here after Stefan Rooks. Number 8 coming up to the back there, Stefan Yoho from the Cass team, just trying to latch on to this leading group. And the sun showing the shadow here of a marvellous day in the Yorkshire Dales. If it wasn't for the cycle race, you'd probably enjoy the day out today, but the riders, of course, going the hard way across England, and there's no harder way than 170 miles across the Pennines, believe me. Visibility today, I think, in the region of 50 or 60 miles. Well, this is the back of the field at the moment. If you look way ahead of our camera there, you can see the riders stringing out right down the moors. Great skill demanded here on the descent, and they must be extremely vigilant, because apart from the sharp bends, if a rider punctures, and believe me, it's not an uncommon occurrence, they must be ready to snap on the brakes and to go round the problem. Here's the gap at the moment, coming up, 53 seconds. Rooks is leading the group that's chasing behind, and our lead car telling us that the whole field at the moment has split into groups numbering 20 or 30 riders. 99 riders on the start line this morning. John Herity, unfortunately, retiring on the road down from Edinburgh with illness. So 99 men survived to fight today as we come into the village of Redmire. And the village triangle there, as the rider Stefan Rooks turns sharp right, comes out under the trees. And once again, the police of County Durham, North Yorkshire, and then into Lancashire later on, they are doing a marvellous job in keeping this race safe for everybody. Association Chief Police Officers employing a new system this year, which I must say really seems to be working well. There's Joey McLaughlin now on the far side, and he's looking extremely confident. Sergio Finazzi was the Italian rider in the green alongside him. But we're back with the leader now, Stefan Rooks. He pulls his zip down there on his racing jersey to try and get some cooler air down there. Temperatures up, I would think, in the low 70s, but there's a very, very strong crosswind blowing, and this is making life extremely difficult. I must say, something of a folly, I would have thought, at this stage of the race, Stefan Rooks, because as you can see now from the helicopter, a gap of 1 minute 40 seconds on Stefan. But the thing is that the whole field appears to have come together. I would think at least 80 of the 99 riders in that group, and this is Sid Barras trying to get rid of them all. Well, this is a marvellous sight for sore eyes. Sid Barras having a go, because we're off towards Hawes now and Fleets Moss, the second big climb of the day. And there you can see the road snaking over the fell of Fleets Moss. And this is Stefan Rooks further up the road as he's being chased now by 39 years old Sid Barras from Keighley. And once we're over the top of Fleets Moss, we go down over Oxenhope Moor, then we're on towards Keighley, where I'm sure there'll be a marvellous crowd waiting to welcome Sid through. He owns a bicycle shop in the town. He was over this climb, in fact, 1 week ago in what he called winter rain that was driving across the fells, and he really was frightened of today's stage. And then just look at the view. It is a really marvellous day, and so quite clearly Barras feeling it's good to be alive on Fleet Moss today, and he's having a go. He's got to catch this man, though, Stephen Rooks. He's taken the world in his own hands today, because he's gone out very early on. 48 miles he attacked, and now he's having to face over 125 miles up front if he intends to win this stage. He's the lone figure of Sid Barras, looking over to see if he's making any ground at all over the pack. Well, we're getting information that Barras, in fact, at the moment has made about 45 seconds. Rides for the WaterTech Doors team, and he really has ridden for most of the professional teams in Britain since he turned professional in 1970. My goodness me, there's Stefan Rooks, 27 years of age. Sid Barras has been a professional for 17. Even by Richard Key's calculations, that means that Stefan Rooks was only 10 when he started out. And there he is. He's racing up to that enormous crowd we've just seen on top of the climb of Fleet Moss. And I think I have to say that in my years of covering cycle racing in Britain, I've never seen a crowd quite like this on top of a hill out in the middle of the moors. Sid Barras looking straight ahead, and he'll see this. The crowd that's waiting on top of Fleet Moss, just where the preem will finish. That's what they call a hill test in cycling, a preem, spelt prime. The estimation given to us is 5,000 people are waiting on the top of this hill to see the first riders up, and they've been in fact there for over an hour because the race is behind schedule. The riders taking it easy. There's the gaps between the bunch. 2 minutes 10 seconds between Rooks and Barras, over 3 minutes back to the main field, and behind the main field there are a number of stragglers now. I'm sure you'll understand that today. Police saying 1,000 cars have been parked on top of this climb today. They've only allowed parking, as far as we know, on one side of the road. Otherwise there'll be absolutely no room for the Kellogg store to go over. You can hear the shouts for Sid here. Dig in, Sid. And the man who's just ahead, Stefan Rooks, concentrating extremely hard, riding in the PDM team colours, a teammate in fact of Pedro Delgado, the man who gave Stephen Roach so much trouble in the Tour de France before Roach finally beat him to Paris. And at the moment it's Rooks trying to beat Sid Barras to the top of Fleet Moss. Changing gears there, Barras a little bit lower down, gripping those handlebars with determination. This climb of Fleet Moss, much harder than Greets Moss. It goes up to 1,800 feet, but the last few hundred yards are approximately 1 in 5, and that makes it a real sting in the tail. Now that's bringing old Stephen Rooks out of the saddle. Oh, he slipped his gears here. Rooks completely slipped his gears. Oh, and can you feel his legs ache as he tries to pick up the rhythm again. Down in the distance there, you might be able to see in the far distance the figure of Barris, who's trying to come back up to this convoy of cars. And just look at this crowd. Absolutely enormous. This, I must remind everyone, is the Yorkshire Moors. It is not the top of Alpe d'Huez in the Tour de France, or even the top of Lutz Ardiden in the Pyrenees. This is Britain, where cycling, believe me, is really taking off. Sid Barris said to me a week ago he wished he was 10 years younger now because of the popularity of the sport, and yet here is this man at 39 trying to pick up Stefan Rooks at 27, still ahead of him on the climb towards the summit. Cheers all the way here for the Dutchman, bringing the lie to the fact that if you live in a flat country you can never be born a climber, because this rider certainly was. Applause all the way to this corridor of sound, and Jerry McDade there, the assistant chief commissaire, I bet he never thought he came along here to conduct the orchestra today as he waves at the crowd. Sid Barris, the sweat beginning to roll off his forehead there. I'm not surprised. Well, how about this for atmosphere on a moorland top? We go up over Greeks Moss, over Fleet Moss, I'm sorry, as we come up towards the summit here. And this now beginning to hurt Stephen Rooks. And over the top he goes, and that is the second major climb of today's stage in the bag for Stefan Rooks, so he must now be considered a major contender for the King of the Mountains title. He takes 12 points over each climb. Barris is yet to come over. This is Rooks again now. He'll shortly run off this plateau and begin the long descent down towards the valleys through Buckton, Starbotton, into Kettlewell, and on through Freshfield and Skipton, and of course Lancashire lies ahead. Amelia Yorkshire Stone here, keeping him on the right road, and this is Sid Barris now in the corridor of people. Have you seen a crowd like this for a bicycle race in Britain before? All the cheers for Sid Barris, the pats on the back are coming. 5,000 people have waited here for hours to see this today, and they're just parting as Barris gets to them. He's going to go over the top in second place, and that's a marvellous ride for the 39-year-old. There he is over the line. Second place for Sid Barris. And the race already splintering behind too as the chase comes for the points. And there's a cry for Sid to give it the hammer. He still finds the strength to smile. I'm sure he'll say, I'm doing just that right now. And these are the next groups over. Duclos, Lazal, Joey McLaughlin goes over. Denis Roux follows. What a great ride by McLaughlin that was. The man who's fighting back in this tour after injury that's kept him out all season. Alvaro Pino in the red stripes there, and the yellow jersey of Alan Piper. That's a great ride for the man who keeps telling us he's not a climber. So Piper goes over in 7th place. Sean Kelly, by the way, passed through there in 10th slot. And this is the rest now, and their faces tell all the story of the day so far. So Rooks now on his way down. Quite a difficult descent this. It twists its way down to the bottom valley, down past Buckton Pike. And a very welcome drink indeed, a few deep breaths, because there's plenty more to come today. We've still got to go over Oxenhope Moor, Blackstone Edge, Denshaw, then down into Manchester. There's confirmation. Stefan Rooks over the top first, Sid Barris, Gilbert Duclos Lazal. We'll be right back, and this is going to be a day to remember. So we'll be back soon. And welcome back on the road to Manchester, and that's quite literally where these riders are now. There's a crash here. Malcolm Elliott looks to have gone down, and I think Steve Jones went down. That's Elliott on the left. Steve Jones blaming one of the Italians for the pile-up there. And this is another rider on the floor here. This looks like Dave Williams has also gone down. It looks as though we're all up and away. Elliott, the last to check his bike over, and is on. Well, accidents happen in these major races, a touch of wheels. These are the real dangers of the cycle race. The riders hope to avoid them, but these riders really ride literally inches apart. Somebody caused it. Now, hopefully, they'll get themselves together. Steve Jones won't let go there. There's still a word in the ear of one of the riders. It looks as though it's Salvatore Caruso, this rider at the back, who Steve Jones quite clearly is blaming for that crash. Well, we're looking down towards Skipton now, but it looks as though Stephen Rooks, the man who was in our previous part, is still out in front by now the lead of 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Now, he's built this lead since the descent of Fleet Moss, and he's passed through Kettlewell. So we're now going towards the hotspot sprint here in the centre of Skipton for the TV time sprint, and this is going to be a real hot one too, because that is Chris Walker snatching the place, that second place from Malcolm Elliott. Rooks has already passed through. There is the confirmation. Stephen Rooks goes through first. Chris Walker gets second place. He's the leader in this competition after the stage yesterday, and that should keep him right on schedule to keep that leader's white jersey. Meanwhile, out in the front, Stephen Rooks on his own for 60 miles now. To some of the riders in the back of that bunch, they must be thinking this young man is absolutely mad to face up to 170 miles, the majority of which he seems content to ride on his own. He's keeping his rhythm very, very well, but this is the bunch who seem a little bit unconcerned at the moment. Denny Roux coming up in the yellow crash helmet there, passes his teammate Duclos Lazal, but he's beginning to warm it up here because Denny Roux is on the attack. He's been very, very active on these moors today. And we're now on the climb of Oxenhope. This climb will take us up and descend down to Hebden Bridge. We've already passed the home of the Worth Valley Railway Centre. It's a very popular landmark here in the Dales. And again, we're seeing Stephen Rooks trying to land another big one, because this is a second category climb, the third major climb of the day. He's won the first category climbs already of Greets Moss and Fleet Moss. And the 27-year-old Dutchman trying... well, I'm not too sure whether he's trying to stay away to the end or to consolidate a lead in the King of the Mountains by the end of the day. I really don't know. Surely he didn't actually believe when he set off at the other side of Richmond that he was going to stay away all day, but he's certainly out there at the moment. Last time check was 5 minutes 8 seconds, and we know that the attacks are beginning on the lower slopes of this climb. Denny Roux seems to be the troublemaker from the Peugeot Daner team, but at the moment it's certainly Stephen Rooks doing the attacking. Sid Barris, by the way, who was clear over the top of Fleet Moss, he was picked up on the way down by the main field. And you can see again the marvellous crowd that's turned out on these moorland heights. And the race still running approximately 1 hour behind schedule after that slow start. They've had a long wait today, but in glorious summer weather. And that's nice to say this year. I think everybody would agree with that. And Rooks beginning to show signs of the pain of the day on his face. Picks his way to the clapping, and I must think that Stephen Rooks here, riding in Britain for, I think, the first time in his career, he's going to go over the top of the climb here of Oxenhope, taking again maximum points, 10 points. I'm sure he's wondering just where all these people are coming from. So Rooks cans number 3 here. The third of the climbs today is his, third of the major climbs. We've had 4, in fact. One was very small, fourth category, way out at the beginning, and that was won, by the way, by Vetislav Palov, and Paul Watson was second there, but they're not anywhere near the point scores at the moment. Stephen Rooks is stealing all of the glory with a marvellous escapade here. This is one of those great adventures. And this is the second group here. This is Denny Roux, and again being joined by Joey McLaughlin, just as he was on Greets Moss, the first climb. And again, Joey McLaughlin seems to be pegging Denny Roux as the man to watch on the climbs. So Roux in the white, McLaughlin follows, riding very, very well. This is a rider, by the way, practically out all year with injury, having won the milk race a year ago and being tipped as a real man for the future. And yet, he's still only 22 years of age. with Denny Rue being left to do all of the work. A rider who speaks a few words of English, not many, but he's picking it up off his sister who lives down in Billericay. Coming up towards the summit here, Joey McLaughlin seems content to pass over the top, perhaps in second place, or is he going to try and nip through and get the benefit of the points? But Denny Rue setting the pace, the wind coming from the left as we look at the picture. And they're over the top, no fight from McLaughlin. He goes over in third place. Denny Rue takes second. And they too now are heading down the long descent towards Hebden Bridge, home of the Rochdale Canal, which has been completely renovated in Hebden Bridge now. And it's quite a festive city. Or town, rather, I should say, of course. And it looks as though Rooks here is calling up for some information. Now, he probably is going to ask the referees here just who is chasing and how far behind, and is it best I wait, or should I keep on going like a madman over the next hills to come, because we still have the climb of Blackstone Edge out of Hipperholme and the climb over Saddleworth Moor, which takes us underneath the M62 Trans-Pennine motorway. An awful lot of road still to come indeed. Well, these are the two riders who are trying to make contact, and Rue looking over his shoulder. And they're obviously having a conversation here. Well, I don't think Joey speaks any French at all, so goodness knows what they said. But judging by his indication, he said, let's go for it. And because Joey's put his head down, Denny Rue is quite prepared to work with him. So two rival team riders, the ANC Halfords and the Zeb Peugeot Danner, quite prepared to merge here because they know their teammates behind will try to block off the chase. Now, this is the whole pack, quite clearly under pressure, but riding along very, very quickly, and it looks as though we're getting 3 riders, 4, 5, small group, trying to go clear at the front, and they're the 2 leaders. That, in fact, is McLaughlin and Denny Rue. As far as I know, it could well be, of course, that we've got 1 or 2 riders trying to get away from the bunch. Our helicopter giving us, once again, these magnificent pictures. And the helicopter pilot telling us, by the way, that he's having a job holding the helicopter steady because of these almost gale force winds. So if the pictures wobble a bit, I think you'll agree he can be excused. Well, these are certainly 3 chasers. They're not... McLaughlin and Denny Rue are still ahead, that's for sure. And it looks as though we're building up a little group here that might well get together on the descent down towards Hebden Bridge. We're in open moorland here at the minute as we watch McLaughlin at the back and McLaughlin at the front rather, and Denny Rue here. But we do drop down into wooded countryside with a few sharp bends, and that will favour the men prepared to take the risk. Well, as they start to make speed, as they come down, well lower down the slope now into Hebden Bridge, and it looks to me as though we've got Stefan Rooks still clear on his own and still riding with a lot of confidence. Down in the valley here now, we're looking, would you believe, at still something like 60 miles to go, and a little bit less than that, 50 miles to go to the finish. That's Phil Thomas here, and this is the chasing group. Now, we've got 3 riders here, Thomas at the back, and they're trying to get up to the 2 leaders, Denny Rue and Joey McLaughlin, and I think we've got Finazzi in this group, and also Philippe Chevalier from France. We'll get confirmation soon. I can catch a sight of their numbers. It's certainly Finazzi in front of Phil Thomas here, and that's Philippe Chevalier on the far side in the Toshiba colours. So number 58 is Sergio Finazzi, and I confess I know nothing at all about him. I've never heard of him before. He's a first-year professional, and it looks to me as though he's celebrating his first ever race in Britain by joining the leaders, because he's up alongside McLaughlin there now. So too is Philippe Chevalier, who asked his Toshiba team if he could come to the Kellogg's Tour because he was desperate for a hard race before he rides the Tour du Limousin in France next week. And he's got a hard one on his hands now because he's got Denny Rue up here too. This is a very, very workmanlike break. Very good break. So we now have a group of 5 men getting together. You can see the wet on the roads, although we've had sun all day on the Tour today. In fact, there's been tremendous storms earlier on this section of the Pennines. Happily, the sun's followed us along, and it's certainly be shining over Stephen Rooks today. He's had a marvellous day out, but surely by now those legs are beginning to complain just a little bit as we go out towards the climb of Blackstone Edge. Well, look a little bit. We've still got Brooks down there. The rumours are that the gap is closing down. There are the 5 riders. They set off in pursuit when they were approximately 3 minutes and 20 seconds behind the leader. They're working very well together, all of them, and it could well be that these 5 might bridge the gap shortly. It looks to me, in fact, as though that is Rooks just ahead under the trees there amongst the motorbikes. So they've come right up on him. We're a shade away now from the start of the climb of Blackstone Edge. We're leaving the Valley Road again, round by Hipperholm, and this climb will take us right out once more into that bleak moorland countryside. So magnificent when the sun is shining like this. The British countryside looks so pretty. And there is Stephen Rooks now. As the slopes begin of Blackstone Edge, Stephen Rooks, for the first time for something like 3.5 hours, is going to have some company. And the man, Philippe Chevalier, at the front, number 40. Joey McLaughlin is riding a magnificent race today. He has a habit of popping up with the odd big victory. When he turned professional after only 4 months, he won the Sealing International 5-Day. And that was an excellent race in itself. Then he came the following year and won the Milk Race. And then he was 5th in the Nissan Classic in Ireland last October. And now it looks to me as though he's landing the right breakaway again. So the right up alongside Stephen Rooks. Rooks looks across. Has he got the legs now to pick up the pace, which is surely going to come? Phil Thomas there, number 23, former winner, and twice a winner in fact, of the Kellogg City Centre Series, the first 2 years. And at the back here, we've got Finazzi. And there we have our now familiar audience waiting for the riders coming up. I'm not sure whether they're zigzagging across the Pennines or whether this is a new crowd at every top of every hill, but they're there. And I think Phil Thomas has sagged off the back because all the following cars are away. So we're heading up towards the top of Blackstone Edge, and there's still plenty of rides to come. So do be back with us for a great climax. And welcome back to Albert Square in Manchester, which heralds the end of this most extraordinary day in the life of the professional racing cyclist on the second stage of the Kellogg's 170 miles about to close down. These 5 men who joined on the climb of Blackstone Edge are now still together with just the 4 circuits of Albert Square to go. Denny Roux in the white, Joey McLaughlin trails right behind him. Then there's Finazzi of Italy. This is Joey McLaughlin. The time, by the way, 10 minutes past 8 in the evening. The riders in the saddle since 10 minutes past 12 this afternoon. And that is unbelievable. Most of the riders in this race have never raced such a distance in their lives before. So Philippe Chevalier brings the riders gently around the circuit. The city of Manchester has come to a halt for the Kellogg's Tour. Nothing but credit can be given to the authorities for a magnificent way they've guided these riders into the city. It has been truly tremendous. And there is Joey McLaughlin now. All that remains for these 5 men is to decide the day's victor. And it's crucial because there is a 10-second time bonus at the line. And if Joey McLaughlin gets it and Stephen Rooks finishes any worse than 4th place, then tonight Joey McLaughlin will wear the leader's yellow jersey. Now, there can't be a finer homecoming than that, because Joey, don't forget, lives only down the road in Kirkby near Liverpool, so this really is almost a Merseyside homecoming for him. Pace being set by, for my money, the man of the day, Stephen Rooks, in the saddle by the time he gets to the line, in the lead for 115 miles today. On the right of him there, Philippe Chevalier, the young Frenchman, tried to prove to his team, Toshiba, that he should have really have ridden the Tour de France and not been put on the sidelines. He's getting his own back today, that's for sure. And we've got the unknown Italian, Sergio Finazzi. He's on the far right in the green, coming up towards Watson Street at the moment. The group beginning to play cat and mouse a little bit now. They've still got quite a few minutes, over 3 minutes in fact, on Phil Thomas. And Paul Kimmage, we understand, joined him as they came off the last climb of the day. Just to make the record straight, by the way, the climb of Saddleworth Moor, which we didn't show you, was won also by Stefan Rooks from this group. So Stefan Rooks by tonight should be the king of the mountains. There's Fanazzi taking them round the circuit. In second place as they come up towards the finish line again, Chevalier in that yellow banded crash helmet. White jersey of Denis Roux. He's having a marvellous season, Denis Roux, 20th in the Tour de France. He really is developing now. There he goes into a top rider. And just look at the crowd here as we come into Albert Square. A crowd that's shown great patience, waiting over an hour behind the scheduled arrival time to bring the riders home, and for the applause they really deserve. All the cheers, by the way, every time the commentators outside mention the name of Joey McLaughlin, the crowd simply go mad. 3 laps to go of Albert Square. And there is nobody else yet entering this circuit, which is approximately 1 mile. This is Phil Thomas, dropped as they came over the top of Blackstone Edge. He never got back to them. That's sad for Phil from Liverpool. He's been joined here by Paul Kimmage of Ireland, but Kimmage, I think, is beginning to suffer. They're about to enter the circuit. There's no chance now of them catching the 5 leaders. Phil Thomas showing his return to Form 2 this year. He's won 3 races this year, but only one of them he probably would really count. He won in Hartlepool just before he travelled up to Edinburgh for the race this week. Thomas, a demon sprinter, but he's not going to get a chance to use that sprint today because the leaders shed him on the climb of Blackstone Edge just when he got an attack of cramp, actually, and that's a sign that he's not quite up to top fitness. The distance quite clearly proving a little bit too much for Phil today, but since then he's held off the whole field, which we understand to have regrouped and still contains the yellow jersey of Alan Piper, but they're over 3.5 minutes behind, and I'm afraid that means Alan Piper, at least for certain, will not be in yellow tonight. The question we all ask ourselves now is, will it be Joey McLaughlin or will it be Stefan Rooks, the rider who set the pace almost since the start? Paul Kimmage, who abandoned the Tour de France near Grenoble this year, which was sad. He finished, in fact, in last position a year ago, and he wasn't too well halfway through the Tour this year. But nonetheless, he's back here in England, riding quite strongly today in the mountains, and working as well as he can with Phil Thomas, who still seems to have a lot of go in his legs there. There's the new GMAC Centre here in Manchester on our right, and you can see the late evening sun glinting. And here's the leaders now. Now this is going to be exciting because there's so much on this sprint. A 10-second bonus for the winner, down to 4 seconds time bonus for the 4th place rider. And if Stefan Rooks can score a single second, then he'll be in yellow tonight, quite simply because he's made time out on the course during the day at those TV time sprints, which he won 2 of them, and each one carried a 3-second bonus. So the mathematicians have been out. That's what it means. Those small seconds today could decide our leader. Joey McLaughlin knows he must win to put himself in with a chance. And McLaughlin is coming through to the front now, followed, as always, by his shadow, Denis Roux, of the Peugeot Daner team. And it's Roux who goes through. McLaughlin doesn't go down the line this time. He holds in second place. He's not going to be caught at the back of this group when the sprint starts, that's for sure. So McLaughlin fights to keep second place. Rooks is in 3rd place. In the right of our picture there, you've got Chevalier. And it's Joey now beginning to set the pace because this is a very tight circuit here in Manchester. Advantage falls to the leaders. He holds the line here. There's 2 laps to go, in fact, but if you hold your tight lines, you might well stop the rider behind squeezing through. This is Phil Thomas. He's on the circuit, but in fact now he's over a lap behind. Although he appears to be coming through just behind the leaders, they are a lap behind, and they have 3 laps to go. So Phil Thomas comes through, followed there by Paul Kimmage. They are in time 3 minutes and 12 seconds approximately behind those leaders. And it looks as though Thomas is shedding Kimmage here. Kimmage has had a day of it, and Thomas knows he's got him. He gives a look across at the Chief Commissaire, Jerry McDade. McDade gives him a time check or tells him about the situation on the circuit. And this is why he was talking to him, led by Paul Sherwin, the British champion. And well done, Paul. This was the stage Paul Sherwin really feared. So his training in the Dales with me last Friday quite clearly paid dividends. Paul Sherwin on front, and he's being taken over at the front here by one of the Italians. So he'll be delighted to have seen Manchester. This was the day he was really worried about. So they're through as well, the whole field, but in time, almost 4 minutes behind these 5 men. These are the 5 that have made this race now. For my money, surely from these 5, the winner will come in Westminster on Sunday rather. Stefan Rux, the hero of the day, the man of the match, as we should say. And at the bell now, just 1 mile to the finish, Philippe Chevalier in that multicoloured jersey of Toshiba. Joey McLaughlin never far away in second place. I think he's fought to keep that second place almost since we left the top of the Lancashire moors. This massive crowd loving every minute of this entertainment here, and it really has been a marvellously successful race since we left Edinburgh. Back with Phil Thomas. He's clear of Paul Kimmage, but he will only finish in 6th place because ahead of him are those 5 leaders. He must be wishing now he'd been that little bit fitter. Now we're coming up towards the sprint here. We've got Denny Rue, who's taking through McLaughlin, who refuses to relinquish second place. McLaughlin's anxious now to see the finish, though. He looks over his shoulder to see what he's got. McLaughlin heads up towards the line now. He's checking if he's got the effort. Look at the face of McLaughlin now as he leads them into Albert Square now. The finish line is in view. Joey McLaughlin is going to win this for sure. Well, that will give him the 10 seconds. Now, where will Stephen Rooks finish? Because that will decide the yellow jersey. As Joey McLaughlin comes clear, Frenacci's fuming. The young new professional in second place. And Rooks is across in 4th place. And by my reckoning, that will make them both equal on time. And if it does, it'll go to the point to decide the yellow jersey. Well, we'll have to wait on that one. We're watching Phil Thomas now coming in. He's going to come home in 6th place. Poor old Paul Kimmage has been dispatched backwards towards the main field. Let's hope he can hang on. Thomas is in all sorts of pain here. He is feeling every inch of this 170.6 miles across the Pennines. The very backbone of England. And this is Kimmage holding on, would you believe, to 7th place. So the young man from Dublin is holding off the whole field at the moment. Bob Rowe from the United States goes through there. Well, this is going to be quite a finish in the main field as Tim Harris tries to bring this field up to Paul Kimmage, who is dead on his bike. And the right on him, and he takes it on the line, so he gets 7th place. I think it was Tim Harris got 8th. Bob Rowe there was in 9th. And the whole field coming over the line at the end of this hard day.
Joe McLaughlin, what a ride. Many congratulations.
Thanks very much.
It must have hurt, 170 miles.
It did hurt, but when I came into Manchester, it felt like I'd just started because of the crowd. I mean, I won here last year in a criterium. The people in Manchester are fantastic, and they just lifted me to the occasion.
Now, tell me what was going through your mind about 2 laps from home when there was 5 or 6 of you sat there.
Well, I was a bit worried about the Peugeot rider, maybe jumping past me, but...